the sequel to one of my favorite films of all time has finally come out, Fantasia 2000. This is what Walt Disney originally wanted to do. He wanted to continue the Fantasia legacy by having new movies come out. But since the first one didn't do so hot, they decided to scrap that idea. However, the popularity for Fantasia kept building, and they decided to finally do a sequel years later. It's fantastic, it's brilliant, it's stupid and lame. It's new and inspiring, it's old and's been done. It's a creative, magical experience. It's a complete sellout by every means of the word. So, as you can imagine, my emotions run pretty high with this movie. But, in keeping with the Disney tradition, the stuff that's good is really, really good. I guess the best way to go about it is just to talk about the segments. It starts off with Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and they're trying to do what they did with the first film by having the abstract art try to match the music. At times it does, but for the most part, it's trying to tell a story. Like how there's this mama butterfly and this baby butterfly, and they try to get away from these evil black butterflies, and yeah, if it's trying to go abstract, why are you trying to put a coherent narrative to it? And on top of that, sometimes the coherent narrative doesn't match the music, so it doesn't even work in that sense. But it's got a few good visuals in there. Next we have The Pines of Rome with the flying whales. This is awesome. The CG makes the size and weight of the whales just look gigantic. It matches the music perfectly, and on top of that, it just builds and builds at the end. In fact, this probably would have been better as the last one, but, you know, what can you do? The story of the Tin Soldier is okay, though like most Disney films, they change the ending around. It matches the music and manages to be a cute little fairy tale. Rhapsody in Blue is a new take, not only in music, but in style, too. They take sort of an Al Hirschfeld style to the whole thing, and yeah, it works really well. It matches the music nice, and it's good to see Disney try something new, especially with Fantasia. The flamingo with a yo-yo... yeah, just say that out loud. There's a flamingo with a yo-yo that's the focus of one of the musical segments in a Fantasia movie. Well, you can guess my problem. It's cute, but really, you could see that on Tiny Toons or something. It doesn't seem like Fantasia related. They replay The Sorcerer's Apprentice, that's always fun. And then we get Donald's Ark, which again, is funny and cute, but let's face it, every time you hear that music, you're gonna think of graduation, and it's kinda distracting. It gets a few laughs though, so I guess it works fine. And the last one is the Firebird Suite. Again, some of Disney's best animation here. Mixing some of their classic style of animation, but also mixing some new stuff. Is it me, or does that sprite look very anime-ish? Well, this one matches the music great, it looks great, and it's a nice finale. Though, again, the whales would have been a little better, but I'm just nitpicking. Unfortunately, we also have celebrity appearances. That's Steve Martin, probably at his worst.
Could I have my violin, please? Ah, thank you. All right, boys, let's... Oh, sorry. Could I have another stick thingy, please?
We also have Bette Midler, James Earl Jones, Angela Lansbury, Penn and Teller. Oh, for God's sake, Penn and Teller? Really? That's like when they invited Beavis and Butthead to the Oscars. Just something doesn't seem right here. Some of them can add a little bit of class and dignity, but most of them are just spending time either congratulating what a great movie it is, even before it's done, and the rest of them are just making really painful jokes.
Oh, and camera back on me. Camera back on me.
Yeah, the look on that woman's face says it all. The original Fantasia had a dignity to it, like they were gonna treat the audience seriously, like, hey, this was for adults, we're not gonna talk down to you. This is some of the greatest music ever written, we worked really hard on this, and we're gonna treat it that way. Here, it's right, Steve Martin!
Could I have another stick thingy, please?
So, on the whole, Fantasia 2000 is pretty hit and miss. But to be honest, the only major miss would probably be the celebrities. I can't think of any musical segments where I was just like, wow, that was awful. I mean, even the ones that aren't very good are just not very good by Fantasia standards. But they're still fine on their own. And as I said before, the stuff that's good is incredibly good. This is some of Disney's best animation in years. It allows them to just be creative, do what they want, just let the animation breathe. There's a sense that there wasn't as many limitations to this, and you know what? It really does show half the time. The other half, not so much. So honestly, despite its flaws, I still highly recommend it. Is it the first film? No. Do any of them meet the power or seriousness of the first film? No. But some of them do come close. Overall, I really like it. Yeah, I hate sitting through the celebrities and some of the other musical segments as much as you do, but the payoff is just too good of a payoff. I say definitely check it out. Just have the fast forward button on standby. It's that time of year again. Time to look over Disney's best and not so best. I've been doing these Disneycembers for several years, and every year I try to have a certain theme to them, whether they be the hand-drawn animated films, the CG animated films, the direct-to-DVD movies, and so forth. And in that time, Disney has just gotten bigger and bigger, swallowing up more companies and trying out different things and styles. So even if I was to pick one theme again, there's so many new movies and shows that are constantly coming out that I feel like it'd be kind of a shame not to talk about them. Well, last year the theme was by popular demand, and it seemed to go over pretty well. I liked it because I could kinda talk about whatever I wanted. I wasn't bound to just one thing. So that seems like the best route to go. From here on out, Disneycember is just gonna be one giant grab bag. Because every time I do a theme month, everybody says, you missed this one, or you forgot this one. Well, from now on, I'm not bound by anything. It just has to have Disney's name on it and be watchable. Well, for the most part. The one thing I do want to add this year, though, is Disney TV shows. Now, if you've watched Nostalgia Critic, you know I've talked about Disney TV shows a lot with Disney Afternoon and DuckTales and so on. But these are going to be ones that I either thought would make a very good Nostalgia Critic episode, or I just want to look back and reanalyze, see if my thoughts have changed on it at all. The one qualification is it has to be a show that's ran its course, like all the episodes are available and I can watch them, so that way there's no surprises if suddenly the show goes downhill and I wasn't there to talk about it. So this Disneycember, the sky's the limit, whether it be live action, animated, TV, movie, DVD, whatever. If I think it's worth talking about, I'm gonna talk about it. So sit back and enjoy. This is Disneycember 2019. Well, since I said I was going to include TV shows this time around, might as well start with a TV show. House of Mouse. So yeah, this show was well past my time when it came out. I was just starting college when this show premiered, and even if I was a little younger, it just doesn't seem like the age group it was meant for. This is clearly meant for, well, little kids. So why am I taking a look at it? Well, a couple reasons. One, just because it's for little kids doesn't necessarily mean there can't be something of value to it. It can still be creative, funny, and new. Second, it's grown quite the popularity over the years. I mean, okay, not as much as its other Disney properties, but you mentioned House of Mouse and a lot of people seem to know what you're talking about, or at least have a general idea. And finally, I think it is a pretty clever concept. There's a rockin' place where you can get dinner at a show called House of Mouse. It's owned by the four-finger one himself, Mickey, ran by his colorful friends you know by name, Goofy, Donald, and so forth. And the guests that show up are all Disney cinematic animated characters. You name it, the Little Mermaid, the Beast, Aladdin, Snow White, all those classics. They usually sit around making conversation and jokes while they run a cartoon as they eat their dinner. Though it is weird to see people watching Goofy on the big screen and then have him also kind of serve your table. It's a little odd. They're actually, maybe it's a little too realistic. They always say if you want to be an actor, the best book to read is this. And generally, that's the setup of the show. Usually it focuses more on the main staff, with Mickey getting in trouble, or Goofy getting in trouble, Donald, whatever. And the cinematic guests either being unaware of the trouble and just respond to the short that's being shown, or become alerted to it and react to it in the over-the-top manner that their character would. In my opinion, the show works best when they show the classic cartoons as the shorts. I like it because it mixes three different types of humor. One is the mostly timeless humor of the 1940s, another is seeing those same characters reacting to an updated environment, and the third being the cinematic characters' reactions to both. When they show the newly animated shorts, it doesn't seem to have the same timing or speed or magic that the original had. There was a sense you could get away with a little bit more in the older shorts because the characters were still being established a little bit and they could be a little bit more violent or mean. They're by no means awful shorts, they're well animated and such, it just kind of looks like they're trying to recapture what they did in the past and they're just not going to do it as well because the characters are too familiar and too family friendly. How often are you going to see Donald Duck hold a gun anymore? With that said, that's also kind of one of the problems of the show. The original shorts worked because they knew the strengths of their character. Goofy was funniest when he didn't talk, Donald was funniest when he was angry. And the Mickey Mouse cartoons usually weren't funny, they were more creative, they were whimsical, they were magical. You watched it to see something really imaginative. So when you focus on them as the main characters in what's essentially supposed to be a really funny scenario in each episode, well, that's not necessarily bad, it's not exactly hilarious either. A lot of these scenarios are good scenarios. They're kind of the classic restaurant on fire, or somebody not showing up, or somebody has to stall and do something else for the crowd. These are routines that have been done for years, and they're usually pretty funny. But you know that Mickey always has to be nice and he always has to have that pleasant voice. Goofy always has to talk and be clumsy so he can't be really mean or angry, or there can be a lot of them like in the old shorts. Donald can mostly be the same, but because Daisy has a much more prominent role in this one and she has a nicer, kinder voice because that's kind of what she was in the original, she was just kind of a side character, now she's a prominent character here, they can't get as many strong laughs. Even when both the writing and the animation is right on point. Look at this scene where Mickey and Minnie come back and the place is destroyed. Those expressions are great. Donald and Daisy quitting to go on vacation after all this shit happened is also great. But when you hear those perfected, non-threatening voices come out of them, it immediately loses its edge.
We need to tell you something.
You don't say.
What happened? We can't handle it.
The same can almost be said for the cinematic characters, although it's kind of in reverse. The jokes with them are mostly hit and miss, and when they miss, it is kind of awkward. But when they hit, it is pretty funny. Especially because, like I said a moment ago, it's reversed. It's not silly characters acting serious, it's serious characters now acting silly. It's funny to see Disney heroes and villains just take some time off, relax, have something to eat, and just chill. They try to act like normal people even though we know they're the least normal people in the world. So yeah, their stuff is kind of in the middle, some hit, some don't. But let's be honest, the reason this show is remembered and so many kids liked it is because it's just a cool idea. The novelty of seeing every animated Disney character in one spot is really neat. Even if they're not necessarily doing anything funny, it's just cool to see these characters all together. It's kinda like in Roger Rabbit. Or those old Cartoon Network bumpers, there's just something so awesome seeing these characters interact with one another. That kind of stuff gets a lot of kids excited, and I'd be lying if I didn't say the inner kid inside of me didn't get excited just seeing these characters side by side. Sometimes they'll have little crossovers, like all the villains will get together and toss the good guys out. I'm not really laughing that hard at it, but how is it not cool to see all these famous Disney baddies side by side, from Hades to Captain Hook to Ursula to the Siamese cats from Lady and the Tramp? The detail they have in trying to include every character they can possibly think of is really something. So yeah, I guess your enjoyment of the show really centers around how much of a Disney fan you are and how forgiving you are of it. If you're someone that likes Disney but aren't really obsessed with them, then this probably isn't the show for you. But if you're one of those people that likes to see all the different Disney characters just stand next to each other and have a conversation, it's okay. Like I said, it is mainly aimed for little kids, and yes, there's an occasional adult joke here or there, but they never lose track of their audience. It's for little kids. So while the older adult in me was saying you can make this a lot better, you could tighten that joke, you could change this delivery and so forth, the little child inside of me is just so excited to see every Disney character I ever grew up with in one place. So is it timeless? No. Is it going to be remembered through the ages? Probably not. It's not even really anything that impressive to be celebrated, but if your Disney nostalgia is strong and you still have that inner fanboy or fangirl that just squeeze every time you see a certain character or characters together, it might be worth checking out an episode or two. This is definitely not the kind of TV movie I expected from the same people that did High School Musical and Xenon. Color of Friendship is probably the most mature any of the Disney Channel movies have ever been. Hell, it might be the most mature Disney's ever been considering the subject matter. I mean, before this, the crowning achievement of racial relations was Pocahontas and Song of the South. Think about that! The story centers around a girl named Piper. She's living a happy life in the 1970s while her congressman dad is trying to fight for equal rights in South Africa. Not surprisingly, Piper hears a lot about South Africa and would love to have somebody come and visit. And it just so happens there's a foreign student program at school, so they sign up to take somebody from South Africa in. The only downside is they don't get a black kid, they get a white kid named Marie. In a perfect world, this wouldn't mean shit, but coming from South Africa where there's a huge divide and inequality, let's just say Marie is shocked that the black people she's staying with aren't her servants. It takes a while for both of them to get over the culture shock, but eventually Marie decides she doesn't want to go back home and she wants to stay. Obviously, over time, she starts to see this family beyond the color of their skin, and she even sees the differences between the two worlds, not just how bad things are in South Africa, but how not always great things are in America too. Based loosely on a short story written by the real Piper Dellums, I have to admit I cringe at the idea of imagining Disney tackling something like this. It's kind of like when Captain Planet tried to talk about AIDS. You just don't think they're up to it. And don't get me wrong, there are some moments that don't work in it. First of all, I constantly have to be reminded it's the 70s. Something about it just looks so modern and current. I have to keep reminding myself, oh yeah, it's 1977. Once in a while they'll try on clothes and look at records, but I don't know, does it really look like we traveled back in time here? It just kind of looks like we're watching a modern Disney Channel movie. The other problem I have is that the friendship between the two girls seems to kind of go back and forth a little too quickly. There's one point where Marie is taken away and Piper's like, no, we gotta get her back, but then maybe within the span of a day she suddenly decides that she's too prejudiced and that they can never belong together, and it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Even when they're getting along, I don't know, they just kind of do the traditional thing of trying on clothes, giggling, and then talking about their different cultures. I don't really know too much else about what they connect on. But with those two problems out of the way, I have to admit this is actually a very adult kids film. Whenever they do sit down and talk about race and the different cultures and what's right and what's not, it kind of has me tugging at my shirt collar a little bit like, man, can Disney do this? Are they able to talk about this in a mature way? But at the same time, I do listen to them, and I believe what they're saying, and it's kind of one of those uncomfortable situations where it's good to be uncomfortable. But even then, they still address there's a lot of problems in America too, and we're trying to get that figured out, and is there an easy solution? Is there a complicated solution? It's tough for an adult to hear, but important for a kid to hear. Honestly, to a point where I'm kind of wondering how many kids paid attention. I mean, it's so strange because I always say kids' films need to be more adult and they need to be more mature, but for a Disney Channel movie, not much really happens in terms of action or comedy or slapstick or usual stuff you see in these kind of films. There's no big chase or evil villain or pies in the face or anything like that. It's just a lot of people sitting around talking. Oh, not that I want a goddamn big chase or pie in the face or anything like that, but that's what a lot of kids familiarize Disney Channel films with. But that stuff obviously wouldn't fit here, shouldn't be here, and at the same time I've heard a lot of people did grow up with this movie and they did really like it. I suppose it's hard to say whether or not I agree 100% on the portrayal because, well, I didn't grow up in South Africa. I've never been there. I didn't know how things were done or how they're done now, and I know chunks of its history, so it sounds right, but again, I don't know how race relations were in South America at the time, so I don't know if this is brilliantly simplified or insultingly simplified. To me, it sounds like they don't shy away from the tough stuff. They talk about when people are beaten to death. They talk about some people being seen as terrorists and some people not being seen as terrorists. They talk about white babies dying compared to black babies dying. Holy shit, this is a Disney Channel movie! I expected to flinch a lot more in this film, but surprisingly, I listened. And I listened with intrigue. Like I said, I don't know how authentically simplified it is, but what it has to say still sounds just meaningful and important. And for Disney to come across that way in a film about race relations, let alone a Disney Channel film? That's really damn impressive. I guess we can say Zootopia wasn't the first Disney film to tackle this subject matter well, because if you look hard enough, you just might find this hidden gem. Every Winnie the Pooh character got their own movie. Tigger, Piglet, Christopher Robin. Even the goddamn Heffalump somehow got its own movie. They had to actually make 2 movies called Winnie the Pooh just to remind you who the main character is. Well, nevertheless, we're gonna look at the Tigger movie today. The bouncy charming character that gives us an almost bouncy charming movie. Tigger, as you probably would have guessed, is bouncing all throughout the 100-acre wood, kind of annoying his friends, but kind of delighting his friends. But one day he realizes being the only one can be, well, kind of lonely. So he decides to look for more Tiggers, and after talking to Owl, he says that he has to find his family tree. He takes this quite literally and goes searching through the woods to find an actual family tree. Roo joins him, as well as his other friends, but quickly they figure out there is no tree to be found. Feeling bad, Roo decides to get everybody together to write him a letter from his family. A family of Tiggers that doesn't exist, but still show their support. Tigger gets so excited at this letter and somehow confuses that they're going to come over the following day. This of course puts his friends in a predicament and they have to figure out whether or not they tell Tigger that the family isn't real or they have to pretend to be his family. You can guess which one they pick. Okay, so this movie is not particularly strong in story, but none of the Winnie the Pooh movies are supposed to be. They're supposed to be simple in story, but emotionally heavy. The problems and dilemmas are not the big focus. The big focus is how it impacts the characters and how they work off each other and how their different personalities can, for lack of a better way of putting it, bounce off each other. And for the most part, we get that. Along with some really great animation that not only surprisingly does the facial expressions very emotionally, I mean there's only 2 dot eyes and yet somehow they get across so much emotion, but also in that old school sketchiness. You kind of look at the line work and it looks like something almost out of the book. Look at all the lines on Tigger. No 2 stripes are the same, they're all so sketchy and seem so alive somehow. The backgrounds are also phenomenal. I watched this in fall and I'm so glad I did because this takes place in fall and winter. And good lord, they're so gorgeous. It's a different kind of Disney background that you don't really see at that time when they were doing animated movies. Maybe you saw a little bit in Lilo and Stitch with the watercolor, but you never saw this kind of style. It's very simple, but very beautiful and very atmospheric, which is what I think Winnie the Pooh is. Things start to go downhill, both figuratively and literally, in the 3rd act. I won't go too much into spoilers, but as you would probably guess, this is a liar-revealed story where somebody keeps a secret from somebody to keep them happy, but then the person finds out, they get really angry, can't accept that the people were doing it for a good reason, can only see that they lied, and then they go and try to get into even more trouble or do something really stupid, and the friends have to go and help, and somewhere there's an understanding about how everybody is happy again. It's so rare that these stories work because they rarely add anything else. That's the drama that we've seen a million times and is tired and cliche, and sadly, this is kind of the same thing. Not only boring and cliche, but it does stuff I feel like the Winnie the Pooh universe doesn't really do. The climax of the movie, yeah, there's a climax, problem number 1, has to deal with them outrunning an avalanche and not falling off a cliff. The original ends with them just walking across a creek. That's more what these stories were about, not how we gonna get off of this rock while we're falling to our deaths. It just feels so phony and forced. Almost as forced as Jerry Springer references and Marilyn Monroe references, and yeah, sometimes they really miss the mark with this. But for at least 2/3 of the movie, they're right on target. They once again bring back the Sherman Brothers to do the songs, and they're fantastic. Well, most of them. There's a bluesy one that's a little weird, but the others are hummable, have brilliant lyrics, and they're just, it's the Sherman Brothers. I just love hearing their stuff. The characters as well are still incredibly charming too. I don't know why they've never botched up these characters. Winnie the Pooh is still Winnie the Pooh, Tigger is still Tigger, Piglet is still Piglet. Maybe because the idea is to keep them so simple, they don't really need to add that much, and that's exactly what they do. They just let them be themselves, and they are just so likable. Which just makes it all the more shameful when you see it works to such a cliche climax. Even the message of the movie you can figure out very early on, and yet it still waits until the very end to reveal it. But again, I really have to give credit to the things it did right. You never do see the Tigger family, which I think would have been a mistake. They do still keep the majority of it very simple, and they still nail these characters perfectly. So yeah, if you're looking for something that's not especially big and epic, except when it tries to be big and epic and that comes across as kind of awkward, this is a very nice, charming, simple movie, which is what I think most people are looking for when they see a Winnie the Pooh movie. I don't think it's among one of the greater Winnie the Pooh movies, but I still think it's worth checking out. Bounce on in and take a look.